Hello, I'm Kelsey Grammer. Nice to see you. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this IMAX live presentation of Renee Fleming's Cities That Sing, Paris. To give you a brief explanation of why I'm actually here, I have a little backstory to tell you. I have the pleasure of serving as the host for Stage Access. It's major new programming, original content, and exclusives. I became excited to work with them because they are the only company in North America to produce, license, and distribute performing arts content focusing solely on classical arts, including on their own streaming platform, Stage Access. And now, let me welcome and invite you to join me with Renee Fleming.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you. It's wonderful that you're here with us today.
Thank you so much.
That's my family.
Oh, right, I know. I know a few people out there myself. It's funny, this morning I got up and I thought, well, let's just check out this Renee Fleming. Now, of course, I know a bit about you anyway, but I got halfway through the Wikipedia page and I thought, this is War and Peace. This woman is so prolific and extraordinary, and I was admonished to make sure that I never say opera singer, but soprano, because 20% of your work has been in opera, and there's been so much else in other venues and other mediums, and it's extraordinary. I read, of course, that you began singing in jazz, which I found really fascinating. Your parents were both musicians. And I wanted to know on a personal level. We have a few questions that have been written out by the people that put this event together that I will get to, but I wanted to throw a couple of my own in first. Your parents were both musicians. Which one guided you toward music, or was that your own thing?
Oh, this is no one's ever asked me this, and I have such a funny thing to say about it. I couldn't think of anything else to do. I mean, let's put it this way, when I was in high school, say, nobody was asking, what do you want? My parents said, why don't you become a music teacher? Because, that's sort of what we know, and it's a nice life, et cetera, et cetera. So I went into music, and then I got really hooked. I mean, I did want to be first lady president. That hasn't worked out, but the job's still open, unfortunately. So I absolutely loved, pursuing music. I loved the practice room and studying all the genre, but really learning to become a classical singer is incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
The languages, the styles, what we have to wear on stage, the big wigs, so I had my hands full. It took a long time.
Just standing up with one of those wigs on is an
accomplishment. That's right, yes, catch on fire.
I would like to say also this is going out to 45 other theaters across the country and the world, even as we speak. So this is a truly live event, which is kind of extraordinary, except for the film, which of course we're going to see in a few minutes. Let me ask you one of these other questions that they've told me to do. Something else. I'll get to it later. So you're collaborating with IMAX and Stage Access in this groundbreaking film, and what introduced you to the project? What brought you into it?
So IMAX was interested in live performances, and Stage Access, they got together and they approached me. They did some market research and they said, we want to do something classical and we need you. And I thought, well, this is exciting because the opportunity to bring opera in particular to a different audience. So we obviously have wonderful HD broadcasts from the Metropolitan Opera, but the IMAX screen is bigger. We have all of these speakers and surround sound, and yet it's intimate. You're going to see me very close. I'm nervous about that. And around the world in one performance. So how could I resist that? Because I'm always looking for ways to introduce people to this extraordinary art form that I love.
Right, and of course you have a very personal connection to Paris. You lived there for some time, and that's one of is that the main reason you chose Paris, or?
Yes, I said, let's start with Paris. I know it the best. I know the repertoire. It's also great. It's great music. So these shows are greatest hits of Paris opera, and it's not long, and you get to hear different singers. It's not just me, and wonderful co-star Piotr Bachava is so brilliant, and two young artists from Paris, extraordinary musicians. So I think it's a great way to try it. And after the pandemic, don't we all want to go to Paris? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
And we're still in the pandemic. I'm sorry, but we all want to go to Paris.
And how did you decide which music pieces would fit the best with this piece and the city?
Well, we started by putting together a list of what we thought were the most prominent pieces, the things that most people know and don't even realize they know it and enjoy. I mean, it's shocking how many commercials on network television are classical music, and I'm sure people aren't aware of that.
I remember the Rice Krispie commercial. Does anyone else remember that?
Yes, yes.
I've brought the Rice Krispies.
Exactly. The very famous aria, Vesti la Juba. So, and you never forget it, right?
No, you never
It's
forget
in there
it.
for life.
It's in for life.
Great tunes. So we started with that list, and then we also asked the artists, it has to fit them too.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to sing?
Great. I'm really excited to see it. You mentioned already some of the other singers, Axel Fagno and Alexandra Duhamel. These are young talents that are coming up. Why did you think it was important to highlight them?
Oh, it's so important. I mean, they're incredibly charismatic artists, and I definitely think it's I belong to a tradition of lifting the next generation. I had my whole book called The Inner Voice was all about the mentors that helped me, and of course we want to do the same thing with young people we meet. And by the way, I hope you all downloaded your programs because the translations are in them, and you get to learn more about all of these great artists.
Yeah. I'll tell you a quick sidebar about my own career. When I was a young man, in my first apprentice season in San Diego, there was a great actor that worked with me named G. Wood. He had a great bass voice, and we shared a dressing room. And he turned to me at one point and said, "Well, Kelsey, one day all your competition dies." I don't know, that's a very curious way of looking at things, but sitting here talking to you, I thought to myself, you never had any. You're absolutely
story.
amazing.
I'm going to think about that. This is what young artists are saying about me now, I think,
No,
probably.
please. So another question, opera has an illustrious history, we all know that, of course, but it's been sort of distant for a lot of people throughout, my experience, honestly. And I mean, people say, "Oh, I didn't know you were an opera lover," and I am peripherally, but it's honestly Fraser that was an opera lover. So I don't have the same kind of acquaintance with it. But you touch on this beautifully in the film. And how do you think opera has evolved over the years? How do its stories still manage to resonate with us today?
The stories still resonate with us today because we haven't changed very much. Evolution moves quite slowly, and so all of the things that were driving forces in opera, vengeance, rage, lust, greed, all of those things are still with us. And not only do we have this, it's also a great kind of marker for what art has been produced by human beings over centuries. And every time I go to something that's an extraordinary masterpiece, a Mozart opera, a Verdi opera, Wagner, these great hits, and you think, wow, look what human beings have done. Now today, there's also a movement to do smaller, more nimble, shorter works that are extremely relevant in regards to what we are facing today, which is a lot. So Fire Shut Up in My Bones last year was incredibly moving, sold out, new audiences. So this is the potential, I think, for new work.
Fantastic. That's great. Something else that twigged me when I was reading about you this morning was this involvement with the National Institute of Health, the idea of music being involved in good health. I thought that was a really interesting thing about your life and your work.
Well, thank you for mentioning it. I believe that the arts should be embedded in our healthcare system across the board because of evolution. Yes, exactly.
And our education system.
Yes, absolutely. We need it. It's in our DNA.
I'm thinking of what Auden wrote about how great chefs and artists blithe the human experience, and I believe that is something you have done.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Let's see if I know I've got one more here. Oh yeah, we've done that. Let's see. Let's move on a little bit. I'm looking at a monitor right now. You devised oh yes, okay. You devised the IMAX and stage access in democratizing access to the opera. Well, yes, we've sort of covered that already, haven't we?
Well, yes, and I think opera is democratic. I mean, houses now have extraordinary programs to bring everyone into the house. You don't have to dress up. You can just go and enjoy it and see if you like it. Everybody should try it.
Yeah.
This is a great opportunity for that, by the way, because it is short, it's the greatest hits, and you're up close. Best seats in the house with popcorn. What more could you ask for?
That's exactly. They're talking to me right now. Ah, yes. Okay, we've got some questions from some of the theaters around the world that are coming in on the internet. So I'm going to read a few to you, and we'll see what you come up with, Renee. This from Los Angeles Century City IMAX. What are the three pieces? And the young man's name is Clayton. What are the three pieces of music you'd use to introduce non-classical people to classical music? The single opera you would show them.
I would typically say Carmen, which is featured in this show, of course, because it's a French opera, even though it's set in Seville. I would say La Boheme. I mean, and Puccini, I have to say, is probably the most beloved and known composer of opera, at least for my voice type, for soprano voice. So those two are really huge. And then the third one, I would say you never know. I asked my children when they were about 10 years old, 10, 12, I said, what would you tell a child to go to for a first opera? And they said, Handel's Rodelinda. Which is 5 acts, and it's Baroque music, and it's not done very often. It's exquisite, but that was their choice.
That's all.
So you really just have to see what sparks for you.
Yeah, that's fascinating. The first one I ever saw was Tales of Hoffmann.
Oh.
Yeah, which was fun, really accessible for kids. I thought that was pretty. Then I saw one called Peleus and Melisande, which some people tell me is a lovely opera, but I thought it was just awful. And I feel terrible about that.
You have to be patient.
I know. But Desmond Healy did the sets, and that they were amazing. So I went out singing the sets.
There you go. Okay.
Humming the sets. Here's another question from Elaine in London. Isn't this exciting, London? What view in Paris moves you most emotionally?
Wow, that's a great question, and thank you for watching in London, because we think everyone else is occupied in London at this moment. I would say Paris. The Pompidou Center. If you go up to the top of the Pompidou Center, it's glass. There's even a cafe up there, and you have a 360-degree view of the city. It's pretty extraordinary, and I don't think a lot of people realize that that's one of the best things about that museum.
Yeah, wonderful. Let's get another one. Let's see. This is from Lily in New York, Lincoln Square. Well, hello, Lily. How are you?
Raise your hand.
What is your favorite opera?
So it's funny, the operas I tend to say are my favorite are ones I've never done. So for a long time, I've always said it was Tchaikovsky's Dame de Pique. And to me, it's an opera that's 100% about obsession. And the music is so glorious, but what gets me every time is the very end, when this man finally dies after destroying his whole life because he's obsessed with the secret to these 3 cards. Loses love, loses money, loses everything, and then there's a male chorus standing over him who are his friends, and they sing a cappella. Wow. They sing just this mournful chorus, and then the orchestra comes in and plays the most throbbing, heartbreaking strings. I couldn't leave the box.
Wow.
Vienna, the last time I saw it, I was in tears.
That's lovely. From Gavin in San Francisco at the Metreon, would you ever consider revisiting A Streetcar Named Desire? You were so wonderful.
Oh, thank you, Gavin. I love that role so much. I don't know if it's something I could definitely sing, I just have been doing scenes actually with Rodney Gilfrey. We're doing them in Chicago in about 2 weeks. So I do thank you for asking. I loved it too.
That's lovely. That's lovely. How are we? What's our timing here? We're ready to move on, huh?
Okay. Ready for the show.
Oh, a couple more questions. Okay. Oh, cool. Great. Here, let's do another. So, we've got, what's been your favorite city during the years? Oh, okay. What has been this is from Christopher in Phoenix. What has been your favorite city during your years of touring?
So I always said my favorite city was New York because my children were here, and that was the most important thing in my life. But in touring, I have to say Paris is really big. I loved it so much. And the places that I love, I get off the plane and almost the first thing I did was go on a long walk just to see my favorite places, my favorite haunts. London I love because I'm a theater fanatic. I'm a culture nut. And in the States, of course I love Chicago, where I've worked for many years. San Francisco is magical. I live in DC now, which I adore. And elsewhere, I've had the privilege of singing all over Asia, which I've adored. I mean, I've been in so many extraordinary places, so I love them all.
Yeah, it's
I have
great.
eclectic tastes in
Yeah.
cities.
Yeah, you've had good fortune and great talent, of course.
Thank you.
I would never diminish the hard work. All right, I'm going to do one more question. Amy in New York, uh, where do you enjoy performing the most? That was sort of the same question, wasn't it? Sorry.
Well, the halls, that's another thing,
Yeah.
because that's an acoustic choice. I love to remind people that we don't use microphones. And so we're kind of trained vocal ventriloquists in a way. And so the hall that loves us the most is the hall that gives us the most beautiful sound with the least effort. And the famous houses, of course, are Concertgebouw in Amsterdam. Certainly in Vienna, there are a couple of really extraordinary houses. And it's almost more like what houses are hard. And when that happens, when it's a really dead acoustic, it takes me, I used to never be able to get it and I'd be tired. You'd be vocally fatigued at the end. Now I can kind of find a little hole where I can begin to say, that timbre kind of works in this house, and I'll just keep sending my voice in that little spot.
That's interesting. I remember I worked at the Guthrie years ago, and there was a gal named Marge Phillips who was a voice instructor there who would say, that spot is dead. You need to bounce your voice off of that spot, and it'll hit to the back.
It's a science.
It was great. It was really extraordinary. Yeah. And some theaters are just impossible.
Exactly.
I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to sit here with you.
Oh,
Years ago I wanted to actually have you on the show, and you were discussed as a love interest or something, but you know what, we're rebooting, so maybe we've got something in the future.
And by the way, his Man of La Mancha, I heard it in London with brilliant Danielle Denise. It was incredible.
Oh, thank you.
It was incredible. What a feat. Yeah. Beautiful singing also.
Thank you so much.
To dream.
The impossible dream.
Yes.
Yeah, something. Folks, we're going to let you watch this thing now. It's magnificent, and thank you.
Enjoy.